It seems like it's taking forever.
I think it's live, isn't
Is
it?
it
I think
live?
it's live. I think
Oh,
it's live.
I'm sorry if I'm keeping everybody waiting with my silence. Hello, everybody. My name is Joanna, if you're new here. And today I have two lovely guests I'm so excited to talk with. And so I have Petrik Leo.
Hi.
And hello, Petrik.
Thank you for having me here. And this is your second booktube anniversary, right?
That's right. And I didn't even, it just kind of worked out that way that this was the date that worked for the three of us. And so, yeah, this is my second booktube anniversary. I started my
Amazing.
channel 2 years ago
Congrats, man.
today.
Congrats. Congrats.
Thank
Congratulations.
you. Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing to be here. And I also have joining me for the first time, both of these channels are new to my channel discussions. For the first time, I have Johan from Library of a Viking. So, hello.
Hi, yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is my first time also talking to Petrik, which I,
Yeah.
I have been chatting with Petrik for more than a year on Instagram, but we've never talked in person. So
Oh,
yeah,
Yeah.
it's really
wow.
great
That's
to finally be
exciting.
here.
That's so exciting. And the reason that I really wanted to bring on Library of a Viking and Petrik on this particular discussion, I do try to think about people to pair for these discussions. And you
Mm.
two came to mind because I think both of you are people that come to my mind as being on the cutting edge of knowing what's trending in fantasy, being on top of all the trends of what's happening in the publishing industry, in fantasy, on BookTube, on Goodreads. And I mean, both of you are excellent reviewers, and reviewers were reviewers prior to having channels. And I thought
Mm.
this would be perfect too to start the new year to talk about some of the trends you two saw over the last year and maybe what's ahead for us, what predictions you might have for what's ahead. But of course, this is the Why Read series, and we always have to start with the question, why read? And of course, I
Mm.
always have to say, this is not really a reading origin question like Dear Dr. Fantasy, but more
Ah.
so, this is a wonderful discussion series that I adore. But it's more so a question about why read now? What
Mm.
makes you inspired to pick up a book now when you could choose to do so many other things with your time, play a video game or go out somewhere or do something else or scroll on your phone? So, Petrik, let's start with you. Why read?
Why me? Okay, okay. Okay, but first, let's say that I've been reading since I was a kid. So it is important to me to always read. Okay. But reading, uh, not only it is fun, but right now I think it is more important because unlike, let's say, when I was a kid, we don't have social media back then. We don't have social media. We do not have, at least not this kind of advanced social media where everything is just so instantaneously. And now I feel like I feel like everything is just being pushed into our phone so fast. And there's a benefit to this. There's a benefit to this. Obviously, I mean, I can do this kind of chat with you too, only because of advanced technology now, right? But at the same time, I think having this kind of very instantaneous information being constantly uploaded into our notifications, our phone, that can get very tiring, even when we do not realize it sometimes. When we keep on seeing at notifications and all that, our stress eventually mounts up. And I think it is even more important to take a break and read because of that. I think reading is really good to actually compress your mental health. I think
Mm.
that's in my opinion anyway. One of the main reason why it is important to read right now.
That's really such a great point. Something
Mm.
that I actually take an interest in on the side is generation theory. You know, like
Mm.
the
Mm.
idea of generations having certain trends, like Gen X versus Gen Z versus the baby boomers, and that kind of thing. And so I've taken a deep interest in that and looked into that a bit. And something that I find really interesting is how, especially and I think this is affecting all people right now of all ages, but especially younger generations, when everything is so instantaneous on your phone all the time,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
stress that that brings to get everything in instant time, to know when
Yeah.
everything's happening the second it happens and not being able to get away from it. And I think it's really easy to, for older generations to judge younger generations, say, put down your phone. But at the same time, then older generations get mad at younger generations for not checking their phones or not checking their
Mm,
emails if they're a
mm,
professor or something. So I think that, we are now out of necessity having to check our phones all the time, and
yeah.
everything is so instantaneous, and there is something so special and beautiful when we get that chance to pick up a book instead or can take that time. And I know that's advice you've given, right, Petrik, about how you read more when you get that question all the time. It's like, just put the phone down.
Yeah, I know that's easier said than done. Really, I mean, it's not easy for me too. But yeah, I think we have to learn to do that. Otherwise, we would just go insane from seeing notifications all the time.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, it's so true. And what
I
about
mean,
you? Sorry, go ahead. Do you were you going to respond?
yeah, I mean, Patrick, he must have a Nokia or something. Like, there's no way he can read this much and have a smartphone. um,
I
yeah,
used to have a Nokia. I used to have a Nokia, but
I did
no.
too, I think. One of my first phones was probably that.
the good old days. I mean, it's a really great question. I think reading is probably the healthiest escapism we can do. I mean, reading really helps me to relax, and it's also just incredibly entertaining. I mean, I think that would probably be my main reason why I read. It just makes me happy, helps me to put my phone away, put my university like assignments and everything in the back of my head and just escape into another world. So that's probably my primary reason for reading. But what I would also say is that, like, I've found that fiction has helped me a lot become more empathic, I suppose you could say.
Yeah.
The fact that I can read a fiction book and I can experience other people's lives and struggles through a lens that otherwise wouldn't be possible, I found that incredibly impactful and helpful for me. And I can sort of testify to that point that I think that it has helped me become more open-minded and tolerant, just by reading fiction and experience different viewpoints. And also, just the third reason is, I mean, it's not the primary reason why I read, but the fact that I'm living in a country where I'm like speaking English, which is my third language. I found reading English has helped a lot with my vocabulary and just with writing university assignments and also just speaking. So yeah, I would say those three things. It's really entertaining, but it's also really impactful to see different points of views in a different lens, and then it also just helps with the English.
Yeah.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah, and both. Oh, so you said it helps with your English. Is English not your first language?
Oh, it's my third language.
I
Oh,
didn't
same.
know that.
Oh, same.
Wow. Two polyglots here. So what is your first language?
So I'm from a small country called the Faroe Islands, which is a Norse country. So that's where the Viking in my name comes from. We speak Faroese. It's spoken by less than 100,000 people in the world. And then Danish. I'm probably stronger in English now because I've used it so much in the past 3 years since moving to the UK. But yeah, Danish is the second language I've learned. But yeah, I'm fluent in all three.
Wow, that's impressive. And by the way, the footage, I have seen the footage in your videos of the Faroe Islands. It's just breathtaking. What a
Beautiful,
gorgeous
right?
place.
It is beautiful, but it's cold.
I believe it. I don't know if I would do well there. But that's really impressive. So both of you, English is your third language. Maybe I could ask then how that has affected your reading experience with fantasy, because a lot of people, I mean, that's, I think, something that pulls people away from fantasy in the first place is the complexity of it. I mean, you have to get adjusted to usually a secondary world and magic and how that works. And I mean, so many factors in fantasy that I think you don't have to concern yourself with if you're reading just regular contemporary fiction.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I started reading Harry Potter and I read it in Faroese. So that's my mother tongue. So I think just having a general understanding of how fantasy works definitely helped before switching over to reading just pure English books. But yeah, it can be hard to read fantasy if you're not that good with English. Fortunately, my English is like pretty good now. But yeah, it's hard to recommend fantasy to non-English speakers if their English isn't that good.
But I think we can always start from something small. I mean, I started learning English back when I was still in third grade. Was it third grade? Yeah, but I was really small. But yeah, the first time I read something in English, a novel, I think I can't even remember the name of the novel now. But yeah, it was a middle grade novel, and even then, back then, I struggled with it. Oh, but I remember I tried reading The Dark Tower when I was still at third grade. I
Oh
understood
no.
absolutely nothing.
It's
Wait,
like having
what
to
grade were
hear.
you in? What grade were you in?
I think third grade or fourth grade. Yeah, I remember nothing.
Oh, wow.
That is pretty mad.
But look, Stephen King has always been super popular, okay? And I thought, oh wow, this is a book by Stephen King. So I thought I might as well try reading it. But yeah, I'm going on a tangent here. But yeah, we
Mm,
can always start from something small. Plus,
yeah,
I always love playing video games, and that also helped with my vocabulary a lot, a lot.
yeah,
That
Yeah.
makes sense. That makes sense because there's a lot of text in video
Hmm.
games, a lot of
Yeah.
storyline, and yeah, that makes perfect sense. And thank you so much, Michael, for the $5. And
Hmm.
I'll just go into the chat here a little bit. I'm not going to be on top of the chat the whole time, so I apologize for that right away. But I also want to say thank you so much to everybody who congratulated me on uh, the second year BookTube anniversary. That means a lot to me. Question to Petrik, your name, great
Great
movie
movie
with
with
great
great.
soundtrack or greatest movie with greatest soundtrack. Oh, that is such a great movie, by the way. Your
Yeah,
name.
yeah.
Mhm.
I will choose great movie with great soundtrack though. I don't think it is the greatest movie, but it is a wonderful movie. And I love the soundtrack. I really love the soundtrack. But
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that it is the greatest one.
It's been a
We'll
few
see.
years now since I saw
Yeah.
the movie, and so I really want to see it again. I do remember finding it beautiful, though.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Such a beautiful movie.
Mhm. And here, my mother taught me to read for a revenge due to mental health.
Mm.
Due to health issues with my baby sister, I went to school 1 year before the age required. Mothers complained, and I was expelled. My mom
Oh.
avenged me. Oh, wow.
Mom avenged me.
And then, question to Johan: are you willing to admit on camera right now that you only picked Library of the Viking because the superior library of the Romans was already taken?
that is hilarious. But maybe I should admit that like the inspiration behind my name actually came from the Library of Alexandria. Because when I was trying to
Hmm.
pick a name, I was like, what should I choose? I want to choose something Norse inspired, but something related to books, and that's actually where Library of a Viking came from. So
No
thank
way.
you, Alan.
That is so funny. I had no idea that. Oh, I just say Alan says that. But yeah, Alan. I make fun of Alan all the time because he makes fun of the Vikings all the time. He says he doesn't like Vikings, but it's not true because he loves. I know he loves John Gwynn's books, but he was joking at the time. He's like Vikings because of Roman things. But
Yeah, that's
let's see, and then probably my most asked question: how do you read so much? Don't scroll social
Hmm.
media, watch less TV. You'll be amazed how much free time you have. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
absolutely.
True,
Um,
true.
yeah, fantastic. And so thank you, everybody. Again, I'm going to have to kind of move ahead in the chat a bit, but I guess I would love to ask because I know, Petrik, actually, both of you have done segments on your channels about what's trending in fantasy, especially Petrik, you've been starting a series weekly. Is that right? Is it weekly
Yeah,
or
once every 2 weeks.
every two
Yeah.
weeks? That's right. So bi-monthly about
Yeah.
what's trending in publishing and in fantasy. And I've been watching that series, and it's amazing how you're on top of those stories that I wouldn't know about otherwise.
It's incredible.
I,
I had
but
a similar series, but Patrick he did it way better than I did. So I was like, I'm gonna focus on something else.
Well,
nah,
you
you should do it. You should do
No,
it.
no, just yeah.
I don't
I
think
would
we
never
can
be
have
able to
too
compete with
many,
you.
honestly. I know Bryce is in the chat too. I saw him earlier, and Shelf Centered, and he also does one of those as well, or he was for a while there. And I don't know. I think it's neat because I mean, even if we have more than one of those going on, I mean, there are going to be different focuses here and there, and so I think that they could all complement each other in a way.
Yeah.
So yeah, what was the inspiration to do that though, Pedrick?
Oh, it was Daniel Green videos. I have admitted this for since the beginning. I have always said this, and it was Daniel Green did this fantasy news, right? And I think he did a great job. He did a great job in the fantasy news. Amazing job, really, at plenty of news. But at the same time, I also think that I mean, he's obviously still one person. So there's still a lot of news uncovered in fantasy news, and there are plenty of things that I love that, well, they are overlooked. So I thought I might as well do my own segment, just try to talk about the stuff that I found, interesting stuff, and also the stuff that I love, like cover reveals, special editions. I love them all, so I might as well just share about them. I mean, that's one of the main purpose of having a channel, right? To share the things I love with other people.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think I think that's so helpful because you also go a lot into self-published books as well. And
Yeah.
that's, that's an area where maybe we don't see a lot of news about, and people are interested. I feel like all the time I'm constantly hearing more and more people saying that they are interested in what's happening in self-publishing. And I feel like I see a lot of buzz around self-publishing on Twitter because there are a lot of authors that are present there. But if you're not on Twitter, that could be kind of hard to get on top of that news.
Yeah, I think sometimes one of the things that I didn't realize at first is how disconnected each bookish social media can be. Like, for example, I did a lot of reviews on Goodreads. This doesn't mean those who actively watch BookTube actually read my reviews on Goodreads. And then at the same time, not a lot of people also have Twitter. But apparently I have all of them, so I might as well combine everything. So,
Yeah, no, and that's amazing too. And so, yeah, and I was also curious too because you have been a Goodreads reviewer. How many years had you been doing that prior to starting a channel, by the way?
before starting a channel,
Mhm.
I started writing reviews in 2016, late 2016, and I started my channel 2020. I think late 2020. So 4 years. Yeah, 4 years
Wow.
of writing reviews.
Oh,
I
that's
still do that though. I still do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And Johan, you had a blog beforehand? You were doing a
Yes, I still technically have it, but I'm pretty certain that I am not gonna use it next year because it's just too time consuming, and yeah, I mean the rewards are
Bro,
miserable. Like
I don't
there's
own
barely any
Goodreads.
rewards for blogging. Like blogging is so dead. So I have no idea why I even created a blog in 2021.
No, I agree with you though, because out of every social media that I do, blog is the most silent one.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just more excited about YouTube, Instagram. I just find them much more rewarding. I still do write written reviews every once in a while, but I just post them on Goodreads now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I always want to get better at doing written reviews, and then I just never get on top of it.
Yeah,
Because I feel like it's a lot of work just to have a YouTube channel for
yeah,
anybody who doesn't
yeah.
know. There's
I
a
used
lot
to
of work.
do a written review for every book I read, but I've stopped that now. So it's only Petrik that is a superhuman in the BookTube community.
No, the thing
So,
is, because if I want to make a video review on it, I feel like it's better for me to write something on it first, and that way I can do the video review on them. But yeah, I cannot. But although I do review every novel, I don't review every manga volumes that I read. Otherwise, I would go insane. Cannot do that. I cannot.
That would be tough. That would be really
Yeah,
tough.
yeah.
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 I'm curious too. So something I found when I started my channel is that, and maybe because I didn't do a lot of written reviews prior to starting a channel, and it probably would have helped with that process. In fact, I think usually if I do the job of writing down a review prior to doing a video review, usually my video reviews can be a lot better. But one thing I found when I started a channel is that it was so much easier for me to talk in depth about a book if I really enjoyed it. But if I didn't connect to the book, I struggled a lot to find out what it was about the book I didn't care for. And it took me a long time, and I feel like I'm getting better at it, at being able to zone in and figure out specific things in a book that don't work for me. And I think that's important, especially because sometimes the things that don't work for you as a reviewer are things that could work for other readers as well. But I'm curious if you two have ever found that too. If you find it easier to talk about books or do reviews on books that you enjoyed versus ones that you didn't connect with.
Well, it's interesting because I often find that maybe it's the other way around. Like if I hate a book, like it's quite easy to pinpoint why I hate it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But I think I think the most difficult is the books that are just right in the middle, like where you don't
Yeah,
hate them or don't love them.
I agree.
Becomes quite difficult to narrow down why is this book just okay, But if a book is incredible or really bad, it's much easier for me to pinpoint. But speaking of doing reviews and stuff, like I always have to write everything I do for YouTube stuff down first because I just need to like collect my thoughts properly. I find it really hard to just turn on the camera and just talk to it because
Yeah,
like yeah, I become quite disorganized if I do that.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And I agree with Johan on this. I mean, it's very easy to, well, not very easy, but it's mostly easy to write books that review for books that I love. It's super easy to write review for books that I absolutely hate. It's so easy. It's so easy. I can do that in less than an hour. I can write 2,000 words. It's so easy. But yeah, I think the one where we feels like in the middle, that one can be tricky because I personally always want to say it's okay. That's it.
It's fine.
Yeah. It's
I think one
fine.
thing that I've tried quite hard is to, even when I don't like a book, to really understand why people like that book and at least try to recommend it to certain people
Yeah.
because there are very, very few books I've ever read that I think no one will like. Like
Yeah.
even I read some bad books, but I still can see like some people will probably still enjoy this book. So yeah, I
Yeah.
always try my best to do that.
Yeah.
Mm,
I was talking about this on another Why Read episode about how when I was because prior to starting a channel, I watched a lot of BookTube. And
Mm,
during that time, I remember I always avoided at that before I started a channel, I always avoided the videos on my most disappointing reads of the year or bad books of the year or whatever videos, even though I knew that they were getting a lot of views. I just never felt interested in clicking on those videos as a viewer. I thought, hey, why would I care about books you didn't like? I'm here to find out what I
mhm.
should read rather than, I don't know why it just didn't appeal to me. I didn't understand the appeal of it. But ever since starting a channel, I have not created one of those type of videos. I don't know if I will or won't someday, but I've started watching them because I found that there are actually a lot of people, go figure, who I watch who have very considerate, well thought out explanations for why they didn't connect first with a certain book. And so I
Mm.
found that that was helping me to understand how to narrow or isolate those variables a little bit more.
mm.
So I think
Yeah,
they
it's
have
interesting,
that
isn't it?
value.
It is hard when you don't enjoy a book and you need to talk about it. But I think it's very important
Yeah.
as reviewers and booktubers that we state our opinion about our
Mm.
books because that also helps build up trust with the viewers. I mean, if you
Mm.
love all the books you read, like who's gonna watch your
Oh
channel?
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you'll become boring. So, but I just suppose it depends on how you say it.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to hate. Like
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I
unless
agree.
it's
I agree.
uprooted, Patrick.
Yeah, no, I hate that. Okay,
Oh
I will
no.
never stop saying I hate that book.
I
Yeah.
But
really want to read it just because you hate it.
Yeah.
but Johan is right about this. I don't usually post dedicated review on a book that I dislike on my channel. I don't do that, but I always post any reviews for any book that I read on Goodreads. But at the same time, as I said earlier, I must remember that not a lot of people have both Goodreads and also watch YouTube at the same time, so they don't know what I dislike. And I prefer to chat about the books that I love on my YouTube channel.
Mm.
But now, starting from now, especially after many requests, I started to create like this probably only about twice or three times a year, like books that I wouldn't continue, books that disappointed me at the year, and something like that. But yeah, we can talk about them as well civilly, as civil
Mm.
as possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, you both do, and I think I think that's important though. I totally agree that is important. It's important to be honest and to state your reasons why in a civil way. So yeah, that's really interesting. And by the way, I mean, that's another thing that I admire about you too. Alan is making fun of me here because I don't use
Mhm.
star ratings personally, but
Uh,
I always feel, but I don't have, of course, anything against people who do use star ratings. I think that's fine.
Mm.
But I said, especially since Alan is the 5 star strumpet, but but I do appreciate that you two seem to have one thing that I admire about you two is that you two, I wish I had your taste in books because you two have like you're in on what the popular books are. Like when I was looking at your
Mm.
video, for example, Johan, you had a couple of videos out recently about most popular authors and most popular books, and you were like, I happen to love all of these books. And I happen to have read all of these books, and I was thinking, wow, like you like all the books that are most popular right now. And I know you're
Yeah.
honest about it. Like I know that's your authentic taste. And I always feel like my taste in books is so out of left field. It's so strange. Like I don't even know how I can predict whether I'll love a book or not. But
Mm.
I just appreciate that. And same with you, Petrik. Petrik, you're always like, I feel like if Petrik loves a book, everybody's going to get that book because the chances of Petrik liking a book means that the chances of the majority loving that book are so increased.
Mm.
Nah. Nah, but I mean, I'm grateful. I'm grateful for that. I mean, I'm grateful that people believe in my reading taste and opinions, but I must state this once again, just because I dislike something doesn't mean that you will dislike that book. It's really not the case. I'm really how do I say this? I'm really not the authority of fantasy books here. Not by far. Seriously, I'm
I
not.
disagree.
You're not helping, but yeah, my point stands. I mean, I genuinely get sad when I said that. Uh, what is this? Yeah. Oh, okay. but yeah, when To Fall of Babel, I reviewed that book. I was disappointed with it. I didn't hate The Fall of Babel. I was disappointed with that, but it seems like my review like swayed some readers away from trying the book in the first place, and I don't think that. I mean, I get that it's probably because they have the same reading taste as me, but at the same time, I really believe that if you love a series up to that stage, the last book of the series, you still should give it a try. I think
Mm.
that is important. I think just because I dislike that doesn't mean you will. Yeah.
Mm. I'm so
What?
excited actually to try the Books of Babel this year. I'm hoping because I'm a huge fan of weird fantasy, and it just sounds like it should be right up my alley. So even if I
Yeah.
hate the last book, I'll still give the first book at least a try. Hopefully I'll love it.
Yeah. I hope
Yeah.
you will love it too.
Yeah.
And if you like it, Alan will be happy to hear
Oh, he
that.
will be so happy. He
Yeah.
will. I do own Sunland Ascends. I do want to get to it at some point, and I keep putting it off, and I feel bad. But I do. But yeah, I know a lot of people have been very considerate about that, and I know a lot of people felt the way you did, Petrik. So
Mm.
a lot of people did love the ending, and I think it's just one of those things that's very divisive.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
book
I think it's
reviews
just
are divisive.
divisive. Yeah.
It's just divisive. Usually, I find when books are divisive, I don't know if this is always the case, but I often find I'm somewhere in the middle. So, we'll see where it lands for me. But
Mhm.
here's
Okay.
Mike saying that I prefer reading everything after Petrik. He helps me thin the herd a bit since we align about 95% of the time. So,
That's the same goes to you, Mike.
yeah, that's fantastic. And Petrik, are you going to read The Spear Cuts Through Water so it blows up? Do you know about that
Yeah,
book?
I've heard about that book.
Yeah. I heard about that book. I also have what's the first one? The
Oh, there it
something
is.
bird? Oh, the Vanished Bird. Yeah, the Vanished Bird.
Yes, birds.
Yeah. I think I might end up
Spear
reading
Cuts
the
Through
Vanished
Water.
Bird first. Look, that is so beautiful. I love
It's a
that cover
beautiful
art so
cover.
much. Yeah.
It is absolutely gorgeous. Here's the vanished birds, but
Oh, you have both of them.
thanks to Evie. Evie gifted me both
Ah,
these books.
so nice.
She's generous. She is BookTube Santa. And so I did read The Vanished Birds this last year, and I really enjoyed it. It was a
Mm,
very solid sci-fi standalone, and it's very character driven. So
Mm.
Johan, I think you would
Yep.
actually enjoy it. I really do actually think you would enjoy this one. And then I haven't read this one yet, but I think this was Evie's favorite book of the year or one of her very favorite books of the year, if not that.
wow,
So
nice.
yeah.
Wow, that's high praise.
Yeah.
But
And
one book that I loved, which is one of my favorite books, which wasn't Patrick's favorite, is The Hunger of the Gods. I think that is the best, arguably the best Junkwin book out there.
Mm-hmm.
And
I
you think
haven't
it's the
gotten
worst
to it
Junkwin
yet.
book. I don't understand.
I haven't
I,
gotten to it yet, but I will.
I'm really sad about The Hunger of the Gods. I don't know why. I mean, I still love that book. I still love that book, but at the same time, I also don't think it's as good as The Shadow of the Gods. And I know I'm on the unpopular side, especially I've been a John Gwyn's like a fanatic like for years now.
Yeah.
But that book is the one that somehow I just did not click as much as you and other readers did. Such a shame, really. I don't know why.
Maybe on a
Yeah,
reread. Who
yeah,
knows?
maybe on the reread.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting whenever you're the odd one out.
Yeah.
You really love the book that everyone else seems to be loving. And it's sometimes, I mean, expectation or and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
actually something I appreciate about both of you too. I feel like you two are just the perfect pairing on any sort of discussion because I feel like I see so much in common with both of your trends with books because both of you I noticed have taken the time to reread books that you weren't sure about the first time. Wasn't that the case? Because I feel like I saw that with you, Petrik. There were a couple of books that
Yeah.
you gave a second chance to, and that you ended up loving when you reread it. And same with you, Petrik. You did that with The Ninth Reign, I think is what you said, that you
Johan.
reread it
With
That was
Johan?
and
me.
loved it
That was
on
me.
Yeah.
reread.
Yeah.
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 For some reason, I didn't enjoy the ninth read on the first read, but I was writing my dissertation at that point, and I was super stressed and confused and everything. So yeah, 2 months later, I picked it up again, and I loved it. So yeah, definitely worth rereading books sometimes.
Yeah.
Which is
I
something
think
I've
it.
actually never. I almost never reread books because I just have too many books on my
Yeah.
TBR. It
Yeah.
almost feels like a waste of time, but it's opening my eyes that it really isn't a waste of time, especially books that you feel like you should have loved. So
Yeah.
the Bone Shard Daughter is a book I want to give another try because I did not enjoy it the first time I read it, but I feel like I should have.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I think it's very important now to recognize that sometimes, most of the time, really, I will argue this that most of the time we do not like a book because we are really just in the wrong reading mood for it.
yeah,
Reading circumstance really that matters a lot, a lot.
Mm.
Like right now, let's say I'm super busy, and then you tell me to read Malazan, I will hate it. I don't have the capacity to read something as complex as Malazan right now, and even though Malazan right now is, I mean, it's one of my favorites. But
Mm.
back when I read Malazan, I have plenty of free time to actually focus on it, and I think that matters a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I was actually having an argument last night on Discord with a friend, with Kyle, read by Kyle. We were talking back and forth because he was getting after me about me famously saying that I did not love Jade City. I know it's my most
Oh,
unpopular opinion ever.
I'm leaving now.
Yeah. That's it. The
And it's not
conversation
that
is over.
I am going to try it again. I'm going to try it again this year. I read it back in 2019, and I think Charmaine, who was in that Discord, she said it best because my expectations were so off for that book. When I picked it up, I was, well, one, I'm a huge fan of Godfather 1 and 2, those movies, and
Uh-huh.
those characters in Godfather, they just gripped me like nothing ever had
Hmm.
gripped me. So I had my expectations of what I was going to feel from the characters in book one, I think way too high. And I
Mm.
also had what I was led to believe at the time that Jade City was going to be a very high action, fast paced type
Yeah,
of
yeah.
book. And
Mm.
she was coming back. She said, I feel like all of those things that you thought the book, like all those specific things, were not what the book was. The book is a slow paced political
Mm-hmm.
intrigue type of story. And there's obviously good character work. And I do not deny that there's good character work and that Fonda Lee is a talented writer. I just think it did not have the best time and with my experience because of what I was expecting or what I
Yeah.
had in my mind going into it. And I also have to admit too that mood could have played a role and reading taste because at the time, nowadays I love slow burn fantasy, but at the time when I read
Hmm.
it, I mean, I read Rage of Dragons that year, and it was one of my favorite books of the year.
Ah,
If that tells you
ah.
anything. So, so it could have just been so many factors. So I want to give it another try and see if
Mm.
that changes. And but it could be that it could just not be for me. Urban fantasy does seem to be a little hit or miss for me, but I'm willing to try.
Well,
Mm.
At the end of the day, though, but really, if it doesn't click with you, then it's okay. It's
Yeah,
just-
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Alan and I read it together. Alan liked it. Alan liked it, but he also did not think it was the greatest of all time. But,
Mhm.
I know Sarah also felt that way about the first book and then ended up loving the trilogy at the end. So,
Yeah,
I
at
mean,
the end,
it
right?
just gets better and better, but every book
Yeah,
is 5 stars for me.
yeah, same.
yeah. Yeah. And then Mike says that, yeah, because Mike did
Oh,
not like Name of the Wind, which I loved Name of the Wind. But by the end of book 2, I can understand. I mean, it is a lot of one character. And if you didn't like that character, I can totally understand it not being for you too. Yeah.
Well, my biggest disappointment of the year, I've only read the first 2 books, but that is Cradle.
oh,
Mm.
I
Cradle? Oh,
did
the first two, yeah.
not enjoy the first 2 books at
Oh,
all. So I don't know.
Mike
People
will
say
love
it
you for
becomes
that.
good at. People say the third book, that's when it starts becoming good. But I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, the
Yeah.
second book is. I don't want to use the word hate, but I did. I just wanted that to be over with.
I
did
get
not
it. I
enjoy
get it. The first time I tried reading Cradle 2, I felt really okay with the first 2 books. But yeah, people told me to give it a try until the third book, until Black Flame. So I gave it a try, and thankfully I did enjoy Black Flame very much, and I continue with that. But yeah, the first 2 can be, they were just, yeah,
Mike is on
okay,
my side.
yeah.
Yeah, well, it
Yeah.
seems like people that love that series are literally so obsessed. So, but it's just something with progression fantasy. Maybe I should try some other progression fantasy, but it just feels, I don't know.
No, and
It doesn't. I
but
don't see the appeal yet, but I'm willing to get my mind changed.
I think it's something about the genre on its own. I mean, the main point of progression fantasy, it's about leveling up, right? It's like
Yeah,
playing a
yeah,
video game, and if the main character doesn't have any other personality, that I have to get stronger, and then they get stronger every book, and then that's it. It's hard to connect with the main character, and I mean, I end up connecting with the main character, Lyndon. That's only in the sixth book. Yeah, before that, I only like the side characters. So yeah,
really.
it's like a problem with the genre itself, I guess.
Hmm.
Yes,
Hmm.
yeah,
That's interesting. Well, one book I loved, and that I'm pretty certain that you both also really loved or enjoyed this last year, was Legends and Lattes by Travis
Ah,
Baldree.
uh,
And I was, I feel like when people hear me explain my love of that book, as somebody who's a huge Malazan fan and Dune
yeah,
fan,
very similar.
epic fantasy fan, a Song of Ice
same,
and Fire
same,
fan,
same.
that it sounds crazy that I could love a book about fantasy characters, slice of life in a coffee shop.
Mm, yeah,
That's low stakes. And I think that what I loved about that book, I think that Travis Baldree was so smart with that book because
mm,
one, he gives you exactly what to expect on the cover. He explains it
Mm,
is
yeah,
high
mm,
fantasy and low stakes. To say that right on the cover, you're not going to be disappointed because you
yeah,
know what you're in for. But
mm,
also, I feel like he's a great writer for one. He's a very, very talented writer, in my opinion. But I also think that it answered a calling or a place in fantasy that we maybe needed that we didn't know we need. I know you kind of framed it that way too, Petrik,
mm,
because so much of fantasy, and I feel like in the self-published industry, we see this quite a bit too, is everything is so high stakes. Like, let's make the stakes as high and as fast as
mm,
possible. And let's make the world as big and complex as possible. And let's make the characters as morally great as possible. That's what
yeah,
you want. Let's give you what you want. And it's like none of us realize, well, maybe we just needed a coffee break from all of that.
yeah,
Maybe we just needed to just chill
mm,
for a minute and just enjoy some fantasy with just, some relaxation time. And I felt like he
yeah,
gave us that in the perfect length of a novel that's just above a novella length.
yeah. And it's easy to read as well. I mean, it's a short book, 200
mm,
pages long, and it's just, well, I mean, it's a slice of life. Slice of life is a part of our life, and I know that there is this argument being used in plenty of my comment section that slice of life doesn't have any tension. Well, I do not think that's totally the case.
I don't think
I
so.
mean, slice of life essentially means it's our daily lives. It's our daily
Mm.
lives. Yeah, that's Legends and Lattes. It's a daily lives of having a coffee shop after the main character decide to move on from her past life, and that
Yes. Yes.
yeah. And I
Yep.
know it's kind of weird, I guess, to say that opening a coffee shop or a business is intense for a fantasy book. But have you tried opening a business? It's really stressful.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
totally agree. Yeah, I think that, it's funny because I know Mike is here in the comments section, and Fairy Tale. I don't know if either of you two read Fairy Tale by Stephen King this last year?
No,
I haven't.
I've
I
heard
haven't.
the second half is horrendous.
Yeah,
So
I didn't. Oh, I
Wow, really?
I wasn't I wasn't super crazy about the second half of that book, to be honest with you, but the first half is slice of life, and
mm,
the first part of that book is so good. It is so good. It's actually when the fantasy part and the
Oh.
plot starts that I
yeah.
think he lost his audience at that point for a lot of reasons, but I could go on about that some other time, but the fact that everybody seemed to agree, I mean, not everybody, of course, you're always going to have people who just don't like it at all or whatever, or love the whole thing. But for the most part, most people I talk to, including Mike, um, seem to love the slice of life aspect of that story. And
Yeah.
I was really surprised by that the
Mm.
majority of people who weren't crazy about the book, the majority of people I talked to, at least on this little corner of booktube, and I understand we're a very, very small part of the internet and of readership, it seemed
Mm,
like a lot of us really loved the slice of life part, didn't care so much for the portal fantasy part. But I'm like, that's saying something that we can enjoy slice of life. I feel like that's
mm,
not usually what you hear about when it comes to fantasy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
true.
Yep. It's very different, isn't it?
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't bad. I mean, it wasn't that bad,
Okay,
well, not
maybe horrendous isn't the word. I've heard that often, but I've heard, yeah, it fell off a cliff, as Mike says, in the
yeah, it
second
just
half.
wasn't really there were a lot of things that
Yeah.
just
But I
didn't
haven't read any Stephen King now for almost like 18 months. I really need to pick more of like that was Stephen King was the author that got me into reading again. But I've just been exploring other authors. But
mm.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
Stephen King is a bit of a mix for me. I totally love his characterizations, but I don't like his endings. Yeah, but
yeah,
I loved 11/22/63, and that ending I thought was like perfect, but I mean,
I watched that TV show
oh,
adaptation. It was really good too, but
yeah.
I think the book will be better. So Stephen King, sorry, one of the things that I know that he does really well is characterizations. I mean, in The Stand, I prefer it when the characters are just talking with each other, even if the conversations are not something that felt that feeling not feeling important. That's part of the
mm,
great stuff about The Stand, in my opinion, anyway.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, no one writes coming of age like Stephen King. It's just,
No.
and
Yeah.
I loved the ending of Dark Tower. So I know it's controversial, but yeah, I thought it was brilliant. So
Yeah.
yeah, definitely
Yeah.
a big fan.
It's a great series. Yeah. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. I think the thing with Fairy Tale is like, how in Dark Tower he does a lot of nods to fantasy. He does like a lot of like um, you know, nods to even his own books or
Yeah.
to Lord of the Rings or to that. And it's a bit subtle. I mean, I didn't think it was over on the nose for me, but in Fairy Tale, it is like very, very overt nods to every kind of fantasy over and over and over again in that portal part in the fantasy
Mm,
section of the book. And for me, it just I I get it, and that wasn't really why I wanted to pick up the book.
mm,
At the same time, I felt like it was more a fantasy book, more as an excuse to have those nods than it was about the fantasy story, if that
yeah.
makes
Mm.
sense. So I don't know. I mean, a lot of people do like it though, so I wouldn't say, and I don't think it's a bad book. I enjoyed my time for the most part, but yeah, I didn't really connect with that last part. Uh, but I'm curious with you too. Do you ever feel, because I know, Petrik, you said that you were not interested in complex fantasy right now, that's just not where your mindset is?
Oh, no, no, no. I mean,
Oh,
just
sorry.
for example, that was just an example. Last year, I was not in the mood for complex fantasy. I didn't, and I was also not in the mood to read Grimdark last year. even though grimdark is one of my favorite subgenre. But last year, I just felt like I was in a bit of a hangover from it after finishing the first Law series, Wisdom of Crowds. I love that book so much, and
So good.
well, yeah, it was such a massive book hangover, and just taking a break from grimdark for a
Oh,
while. Yeah,
yeah.
but this year I'm starting to feel like the mood is back again, and yeah, I want
Mm,
to read more again. Yeah.
That's
yeah.
cool. Do you consider yourself a mood reader?
A bit, I would say a bit. I don't think it's possible to actually be completely not mood reader. I don't think. I mean,
Mm.
I made monthly TBR pal, right? Monthly TBR, but I base that at the end of the month, at the end of each month. So, by the end of each month, I feel like I want to read this, and this, and then I put that in my next month TBR, something like that.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I never make TBR videos. I think I've made one where I talked about the series I want to read.
Ah,
But
yeah,
usually I have a rough idea for this month. I want to read these books, but I'm not making any promises if I want to change my mind. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I can understand that. Yeah, I'm just curious too. Do you two feel because you do both have such big followings, and I feel like there might be a little bit of an expectation of you two. Like I said, I see you two personally, just as a viewer, as being on top of what's trending right now in fantasy. Whether you did that on purpose or not, I do feel like you two are really good at following the trends and keeping up with what's big. Do you two ever feel any pressure to read certain types of fantasy to keep up with trends? Or do you more go by, well, this series that's really famous or popular sounds
mm,
interesting, but I don't think that's really where my interest is. Do you feel any sort of tug
Mm,
and pull with that?
yeah, it's a good question. So I don't think I'm chasing trends, but since
Mm,
I watch so much booktube, I just automatically hear so much about like recent books and stuff, which also makes me pick up recent books. So I think that's probably the main reason. But I mean, even now, like I haven't read Name of the Wind. I have only read the first two books in the Game of Thrones.
mm.
But I did read those way before I got into fantasy, so I need to give those a proper try. And I just read Lies of Lochlamora a week ago for the first time in my life. So there's a
yay.
lot of like big fantasy books that I haven't really properly read that I probably should have if I call myself a fantasy reviewer. But
Nah.
I don't care. I don't really care if people say like you. I don't think you need to read any specific books.
Yeah.
But I have read Lord of the Rings, so I'm not in that category. Yeah.
I
So
Wait,
mean,
you have
I,
or haven't?
I
Sorry.
have. I have. Yeah.
Okay. Just
yeah.
curious. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was in that stage, when I haven't read a Lord of the Rings. I read Lord of the Rings for the first time. Finally, it was in the year 2019 or 2018. So
Mm.
back then, I've read and reviewed probably about 200 or 300 novels, and still,
Wow.
a lot of people say you are not a fantasy reader, you are not a fantasy reviewer. What are you? You haven't even read Lord of the Rings. Yes, obviously the genre consists only of one series. Yeah.
Mm.
Ridiculous. That is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But to go back to your question, I don't chase trends. I mean, I never look into it. But at the same time, we're active on BookTube, right? We're active on BookTube. I mean, I don't think it's possible to actually ignore what's trending when we
Yeah.
subscribe to plenty of booktubers. But it's also important to remember that what's trending on BookTube doesn't mean that it's trending anywhere else. Sometimes it's only on BookTube, and that also uh I'm not pressured to read the popular books, but at the same time, I'm excited. I'm excited to read the popular books, like Mike book review. I think he's responsible to actually make Sun Eater series by Christopher Rocchio so much more popular on
Yeah.
BookTube. I know about that series for years now, and never have I once tried to look into it further until Mike did a review on that book, and then it
Yep.
just suddenly it's a snowball effect, right? Like people
Yeah.
are starting to read and review that series, and more people are now interested in it, and myself included. I'm not pressured, but at the same time, I want to read so much, but my time is limited. That's the stress part of me, for me anyway.
Yes,
Mm.
absolutely. I think that that's also a factor is, time is limited and there
Yeah.
is so much good fantasy to read. And I think that's ridiculous if anybody tells anybody that they're not a true fantasy reader because they haven't read Lord of the Rings or any sort of fantasy. I think that that's silly. I just wondered too, because I mean, I really am a true, authentic lover fan of Steven
Mm,
Erickson's Malazan Book of the Fallen. It is
mm,
my favorite series of all time, but I gush about it, and then I feel like people hearing me gush about it, even I hear people because other people gush about it too, obviously who've read it, but then I hear people say, "Oh, I should read Malazan," or put pressure on themselves to take on this huge epic fantasy series. And
mm.
I don't think people should ever feel pressured to read a series if they don't feel just
Yeah,
because it's, to feel like you've read the important fantasy. I don't think that that's necessarily I guess if you want to do that, do that. But I
yeah,
mean, if you don't want to read the series, I don't feel like you should have to feel pressure to read it, you know? I guess that's what I'm
Yep,
trying to say.
absolutely. And for like this year has been like a learning experience for me, kind of, because I haven't been able to read as much as I usually do. So I usually read like 60 to 70 books per year, and this year is
mm,
45 books, which is obviously quite a big decrease. But I've just been busy. Like I'm doing a master's degree, and I feel totally fine with it. Like I don't feel ashamed that I haven't been able to read more or less, And I think that's just
mm,
important, especially when you do booktube and stuff. Like you can sometimes feel the pressure. So I think it's just more important that you enjoy reading than that you read 100 books a year.
yeah.
Yeah,
I know, I agree. And
absolutely.
yeah,
That's why I created this series called Why
yeah,
Read, because I wanted to focus back on like our love, why we love reading, and
Yep.
and bring it back to that why, because I feel like even as a content creator, there is pressure to read a lot of books and to have a
Yep.
lot to say, and I just never want to lose the focus of why that's important to us. So
yeah.
oh,
Absolutely.
absolutely. Says here, Mike says here, I get that comment all the time. I didn't list a series I've never read on my top 10 fantasy series. They couldn't take my opinion seriously if I didn't list a series.
Yeah, I know this
That is
kind of
so
comment.
true.
We get it all the time. I think just a few days ago, I get this comment. Oh, Patrick, love Warbreaker. Your taste is absolutely laughable and should be a joke. And then at the same day, someone commented, "Oh, you love Warbreaker. I love that book. So which one do I appeal to,
Yeah,
huh?" Yeah,
yeah. I there's just it's so silly with that. I think that's the
yeah.
thing too. Like I always say my taste is so don't necessarily go by my taste, just like say try to go by what I say rather than just because I love it. Because I did a video one time on books that I don't recommend to everyone. And
Mm,
yes, I could say that about pretty much everything. Everything I read, I don't necessarily recommend it to everyone. And I do feel like people say, "Oh, Joanna, love that book," and they feel the emotion, and we get very empathetic with people that we see online. And
Mm,
to be fair, some of us make thumbnails to elicit a certain emotional response. I read the best book of all time, in the
yeah.
thumbnail. And so we do like we are trying to elicit, I think, an emotional response, and then people take that to heart, maybe. But I don't think people should, should put things in context and recognize what is it specifically about that book, because I know, yeah, I think that Evie mentioned earlier, Before the Coffee Gets Cold, which is it's a Japanese sort
Oh,
of
oh
sci-fi
yeah.
time travel
Uh,
book. It's just a cozy book, and I loved it. I loved it. I thought it was so sweet and cozy. And then people read it and they were like, "This was not that good." And I felt so bad. And I said, "Well, it's a vibe. It's a translated work too, and I'm not sure how good the translation is, but I really enjoyed it."
mm,
So yeah, I think that what you have to say is more important. But also, I think we're in a time now, and you two could probably tracked that too, where we have more fantasy than ever. It seems like we have more
oh yeah.
fantasy subgenres than ever.
yep.
Were there
Yep.
and like the grimdark fantasy genre alone seems to have a whole bunch of subgenres within grimdark.
Yeah. Yeah.
And epic fantasy has a whole bunch of subgenres within epic fantasy. Were there any sort of trends that you noticed this last year with fantasy that come to mind?
Well, it's interesting. I think with modern fantasy, generally, it seems like there's less and less exposition in books.
Mm,
Like books need to be a bit more fast paced, at least modern books than it used to be. But you also just see more trends, like you have Asian inspired, African inspired, American inspired. You have so many different fantasy books popping up, but especially like exposition. Like if you read a book from the 80s, they'll spend 15 or 20 pages on a walk from the bar to the shed or something. But now it'll be like 3 lines. So that's at least one trend I've noticed.
Yeah, that's true. So basically the exposition is not so heavy on the front end of the book. It's
Yeah.
more interspersed throughout the
Yeah, I
story.
mean, the perfect example is the Winry Flame trilogy. Like that almost just blew my mind how little exposition there is. I mean, the world building is great, but there are a lot of travel sequences in that series. But
Mm.
she spends 10 sentences on traveling from point A to B. Like the character will say, "We need to go to this mountain 7 hours away," and then it'll just say when they arrived. Like almost like it's pretty mad. But also just I'm reading the heroes now, and I mean Abercrombie,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
just pure dialogue. Like you don't read about the mountains and the waters and the hills and stuff like what they look like. It's almost like 90% dialogue in those books, which is quite astounding, but it's also amazing.
Yeah. I'm noticing
Yeah.
that in my A Song of Ice and Fire reread right now of Game of Thrones. I had forgotten how dialogue heavy Martin's prose is, and
Mm.
it's so good. Like his
Yeah.
dialogue is
Oh, Martin's
incredible.
dialogue is amazing.
It's so good.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
so
it
amazing.
is so good, especially in the first 3 books. Insane.
Yeah, it's insane. And how he could do
Mm.
perspectives of children versus adults, versus men versus women. It completely blows my mind. But that's an interesting trend. Yeah, that's a interesting thing to notice.
Mm.
I definitely think what Johan said is right. I mean, the more modern we're leaning into right now, the more less exposition the books get. Most of the time, anyway. And right now, one of the things that has been going on for plenty of years is that traditional publisher doesn't sell classic epic fantasy anymore. And I think that is such a shame.
Mhm.
For me, anyway,
Mm.
I have always loved classic epic fantasy. And right now, if we want to get the newly published epic fantasy style, classic epic fantasy style, like Lord of the Rings and all that, but told in a modern voice, well, we have The Faithful and the Fallen. But that one, shockingly, has been published for almost 10 years. So
Yeah.
yeah, oh, I think it has been 10 years. So yeah, it has been quite a while. And
Mm.
even then, there's still not many of them. And I know that one of the argument being used is that they don't sell, but I do not agree with that. Self-published fantasies sell a lot using classic epic fantasy, a lot of books.
Mm.
So yeah, that is a trend that I don't like right now. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
an interesting one. I had no idea about that, by the way.
Hmm.
It's interesting. Thank you,
I
Bryce, for
suppose
showing up. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just another trend I've noticed is that representation is becoming more and more important in
Mm,
fantasy, right? You'll have more groups represented, which I think like it's
Very
it's a good
helpful,
thing,
yeah.
and yeah,
mm,
and it comes back to my first point about why I read, like because I feel like I've become a more like I know how to understand more points of views now because I read more fantasy books that have different groups represented. So I don't think that's a bad trend, but that's definitely
yeah.
something I've noticed as well.
I'm really glad to see that trend happening because
Mm.
prior to starting a channel, when I first found out about BookTube, it was before the algorithm figured out I was an adult, I think, or I was older or something. I don't know. Not saying that adults can't read YA. I'm not saying that, or that adults my age can't enjoy YA. But I hadn't found people like you two hadn't had channels yet, but I have
Mm,
Philip and Mike and Bryce and Alan. I hadn't found channels like that yet. And so the YouTubers that I found, a lot of them were covering YA fantasy. So that was what I started picking up. And I don't regret it. I enjoyed reading a lot of YA fantasy. But that was a trend I
Mhm.
noticed in YA fantasy that was very strong, even a few years ago, was the diversity and representation
mhm.
in books. I feel like YA fantasy to this day is way ahead of the game when it comes to that mental
Yeah.
health representation, all of that
Mm,
stuff. And I feel like
Mm.
adult fantasy is starting to catch up. It's
Yeah.
starting to
mhm,
catch up, but I feel like YA actually has been ahead of the game on that one.
Mm.
mhm.
Yep. As long as love triangles doesn't come to adult fantasy, I'm fine.
Well, I have to say, Adrian Tchaikovsky's Guns of the Dawn. I know
Ah,
that Fun Fantasy Books is
Yeah,
that
yeah.
the file name?
Her
She
favorite
named
book of the
that
year.
as her favorite book of the year. That has the
mm,
best love triangle I've ever read in fantasy.
Mm.
Yeah,
wow.
yeah. because Tchaikovsky managed to create a love triangle that related to the themes of the story in a broader, bigger sense. So
Yeah.
it felt like it expanded beyond just the characters themselves in a way. It's a good story, though. Great standalone.
I want to read that, but again, Tchaikovsky is just like Sanderson. He released so many books.
Oh, yeah.
Like
That's a
this
standalone.
year?
That's a nice thing. It's a
Yeah.
standalone, and he has a really nice prose style, which I think is like very accessible, because I think that's probably something that's a little bit more of a modern trend too, right? Is to write in a way that's accessible, that flows well, that's
Yeah.
doesn't have too many archaic words, that kind of thing. But at the same
Yeah.
time, it still feels like it has a tone that fits that Flintlock fantasy feel. So I think that that's actually a pretty solid standalone.
Yeah, definitely want to read more Tchaikovsky. I've only read Shards of Earth, and that was just way too science heavy for me. Like hard science fiction. Like I was so overwhelmed. It was almost like reading Malazan.
Wow.
Like I did not understand anything.
Dang, wow.
I need to try some of his fantasy, I think.
Yeah. What kind of trends do you two predict for going into this year for 2023? Do you think there's anything that you think might be on the horizon that we're going to see more? Maybe you've started to see it this last year that you think you might start to see more of this next year?
Yeah. I think I have 3 guesses. Well, I think 2023 will be the best year for self-published fantasy.
I agree.
The reason for that is, I mean, the rise of TikTok and stuff like that, but also just like the Broken Binding now, they are making like premium special editions of self-published books, and you have companies like Wraithmarked that are like bringing self-published books up to almost higher quality than traditional published books. So I think like there's a huge evolution in self-publishing right now, and it just seems like more and more booktubers are also becoming willing to try self-published books. So I think this is going to be the best year. I mean, it's not going to reach the same level as traditional published books. I think that's quite far away yet in a lot of ways, but yeah, definitely. I think it's going to be the best year for self-published books. So that's my first guess. I have 2 others, but I'll let Petrik.
I really only have one. My prediction is that self-published fantasy will keep on rising, but I think traditional publish will remain stagnant right now. I do not. From the past few years, I don't see anything much coming from traditional publisher. I mean, most of the things that I found out or new end up finding about, all of them are problems from traditional publisher. And right now, I really think that self-publish is a very viable option when authors want to start publishing their books, and definitely a viable option for readers to choose plenty of great books. That's really my opinion. And I think this year for self-publish will be even better than last year.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And speaking of self-published, we have PL here from the Drowned Kingdom saga. So thank you so much, PL. And I know that Philip is going to be self-publishing his book, so hopefully we'll hear about that more soon. But
nice.
yeah, I think it's okay for me to say that, Philip, because I think you said that on a recent Dear Dr. Fantasy. But yeah, so I hope, I'm sorry if I wasn't supposed to say that. But I think that's pretty exciting, though.
Announcement.
What's going to happen with that? And so, yeah. So what do you all think about? So with self-publishing, one of the big challenges with that is that self-publishing. Oh, thank goodness. With self-publishing, is that you can with self-publishing, you don't really get the editors or the review process with editing and polishing and formatting that you would get with a traditionally published book. And I've seen, so I have seen with self-publishing, it varies. I mean, sometimes you get books that are very, like for example, Tiago Abdallah's A Touch of Light, which I recently read. That one was very polished for a self-published book. I was very impressed. But I have read some where I thought, oh, some of these sentences are a little clunky and there are some typos. And I'm just wondering, are there ways that self-publishers or self-published authors are able to get around those kind of hurdles?
Well, I've only like chatted with quite a lot of self-published authors now. But I recently chatted with Travis Baldry, and he said, I mean, the only thing that's in the way for a self-published book to become good is the willingness of the author to invest money into the project. So that was the only thing he said. But it's expensive. Like he also said that. But if an author is willing to spend, considerable money into a good editor, then that really shouldn't happen. Yeah.
Yeah, it is expensive. That's one of the major problem of doing
Yeah.
self-publish. I mean, not everyone can hit it off instantly like Travis Baldry. I mean, Travis Baldry became successful merely just from a tweet. It's merely from one tweet and a cover that he posted, and just because of that, that book became, well, we all know now, it's super popular now. Now that is a very rare circumstance, and self-published fantasy usually doesn't go that route. Usually,
Yeah.
but
He
I will. Sorry.
Amazing. No, I'm just so impressed with that because, like I said, I think he's the only self published author that I've ever seen who took the route of like, I'm going to do a cozy slice of life
Yeah,
high,
yeah.
high fantasy for adults. Like that was so anti trend. And yet
Mm.
it was exactly where everybody gravitated towards in just one tweet. I'm sorry. Just wanted to remark on that again.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
it's okay.
Just
But
business.
yeah. My point stands that they are expensive. But come on, look at traditional publisher right now. They're right now going down the route of using AI cover. What's the point? They're not offering any advantage on the cover art now. And I also heard from many authors. I will not name people here. I've also heard from many authors, traditional published authors, that, well, right now it's basically the same as self-publishing. They still
Yeah.
have to market themselves all the time, all the
I've heard
time.
as well.
What traditional publishers do, again, this is just for some cases, not a blanket statement here, and I know, but a lot of authors are facing this right now, especially the one that are not too popular and also in the mid list. Some of them are facing this. Basically, what publishers are doing, mostly are doing for them, are tweets. Come on, tweets aren't
Mm.
helping. Not enough.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's interesting because I've chatted to some published authors who are really like not satisfied with the publishing house at all.
Yeah.
But I did a chat with Ryan Cahill a year ago about
Mm,
self-publishing,
mm.
and I suppose like this thing that he kept repeating is that there's no silver bullet for how to succeed. I
Yeah.
mean, there's a lot of luck, but like I suppose that interview also made me appreciate how hard it is to be an author. Like it just seems brutal. Like people will work on a book for 3 years, and publish it and sell 100 copies or 1,000 copies, and that's it. So
Yeah. And it seems like even if you have become successful publishing your books, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're guaranteed to be published in the future.
no,
Yeah.
no,
I
definitely
mean, I
not.
don't know for sure his story. I haven't asked him, but I know like Michael R. Fletcher, for example, he's a published
Mm.
author. He's published his books,
Mm,
but now he's doing self-publishing. And I don't know exactly what informed his decision to change routes on that, but
yeah.
That was because Beyond Redemption, the first book published by Harper Voyager, didn't sell as much to guarantee a sequel from the publisher. So because of that, Michael R. Fletcher decided to release the sequel in self-publish, The Mirror's Truth, right? Yeah, The
oh
Mirror's Truth is
wow.
self-published. But yeah, that's the point. Traditional publishing doesn't guarantee you will be successful. And it certainly doesn't guarantee the book will be good. I mean, Uprooted.
No.
Yeah, I'm going back to that. Yeah.
You won't let it go.
Nah, never. That book
Nailed
is
it.
insane. Yeah.
At
I'll
least you
I'll
wrote
I'll, I'll
himself.
form a read along for Uprooted, and I'll write like book review and Matt on
It
books.
has some of the most insane relationship development I've seen. Yes, insane.
Oh, oh no. Well, at least you wrote a book you do like, Spinning
Mm.
Silver, right? So
Yeah. So it's now 50-50.
Yeah.
there you go. Yeah.
But my other prediction is that I think special editions will continue to rise, but I
Yeah.
also think the market will start to saturate probably at the end of this
Mm.
year. Because I mean, the amount of special editions that are coming out, at least in the UK, is just too much for the average person, and the books aren't even going up in value anymore. Like they might
Mm.
sustain their value. Like
Oh, really?
in some cases they go down in value. Like Goldsboro have
Oh,
published a lot of special editions that are worth less now than a year ago.
Wow.
So
wow. I didn't know
yeah,
that. Okay.
no, I'm subscribed to Goldsboro's like subscription, and like I mean those books go down in value so fast, except maybe one or two they publish a year. Like 10 out of 12
Ah.
they go down in value in 2 or 3 months because no one cares about those special editions. I think it's different with the broken binding, but even out they also they publish so many special editions.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I mean, I do SFF Spotlight, and I have to mention them every
yeah,
every episode. They
it is
always have
mad.
something new. It's crazy.
The broken binding, or
Yeah, the broken
yeah,
binding, the broken binding.
But it's
yeah.
just so many special editions. I think the market will saturate. But my last prediction for 2023 is that I also think like BookTube will experience quite a big change in this year. Like I think short form content will become much more
Mm,
popular. I mean, obviously we have TikTok that's been around now for a couple of years, but even on YouTube they'll start monetizing short form content. But also I've noticed like a lot of smaller BookTube creators that are coming to the platform. The only way they can become big is by doing quite innovative videos that maybe have higher quality editing and stuff like that. And I think, yeah, I think some booktubers, at least that will want to continue to grow like rapidly, will need to improve either their video ideas or editing or stuff because I think it's just going to become very, very, very competitive in 2023.
mm.
Wow. Yeah, that's kind of sad because I try not to think of this as so much a competitive thing.
Yeah, well, I suppose it depends on why you do booktube, right?
Yeah,
Like people
Yeah.
that do it for a living, which obviously I'm not doing it for a living, but
yeah.
like if you want to do booktube for a living, then you need to start thinking about stuff
Oh,
like
as a
that. How do
living.
you make a
Oh,
video
okay.
entertaining and stuff like that? You know?
Yeah. Are you doing it as a living, Johan?
No,
Or
no, no, I don't. No,
oh, okay.
I'm a
Yeah,
full-time student.
that's true.
Full-time
Yeah,
student. But
yeah.
I think that is a great point. TikTok is super popular right now.
Yeah, yeah,
It's insane. The number of views and the number, I think it's the way their algorithm proceeds, right? Their algorithm is really good at catching people's attention. And because of that, yeah, the number of views just increase so much all the time. Philip.
we need a video seeing Philip wearing shorts now.
Well,
Yeah.
Next book review.
and playing tennis, yeah. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think I know for me, and this could be a generational thing. I'm
Mm,
not usually. I do occasion. I have watched a couple of shorts that have been entertaining, and but that's usually not the first thing I click on. Sometimes I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, short, short, short. I want to see somebody for a little bit longer, and it's interesting too because
Mm.
I feel like my content just it just so happens that my videos tend to be really short because I edit them out a lot. I do edit
mm,
out my pauses because I can't stand watching myself pause and breathe and
yeah.
swallow and
Same.
I just can't. Other people it doesn't bother me at all, but for myself when I'm editing myself, I just can't stand it. So I edit my videos quite a bit. Um, but I do enjoy watching people's longer form content. And
Yeah.
so yeah, but just by default, my videos do tend to be a bit short, and I always feel like maybe that means I don't say enough. So I'm always
Mm.
questioning that. But
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, I feel like I have so much to say about this, but I still think there's gonna be a place for like talking heads videos that are not edited like crazy, and I really think that people that do booktube for a hobby should not worry. Just do what you enjoy. It's mostly for those people that are very focused on growth and stuff. Like you can maybe look at some trends, but I feel similar to you with short for content. Like I don't have a TikTok. I do have TikTok, but I don't use it. I just
Mm.
feel like whenever I watched many reels or TikToks or whatever you want to call it, like I just don't feel like I received anything valuable.
Yeah.
But long form content still does provide value in that sense. Like I don't feel like I wasted 10 minutes watching a review from Petrik or 40 minutes from Mike's book review. No, just kidding.
30 minutes.
No, just kidding.
Ah. Yeah, no, I really I love your reviews, by the way, Mike. You're fantastic. So
Yeah.
don't change
Definitely.
anything. Yeah, so I think that it's just interesting. I don't think that
Mm,
the long form content, at least for me, I just try to go by like as a content creator, I try to go by one content that sounds inspiring or exciting for me, enjoyable. Because if it's not enjoyable for me, then that's probably not
mm,
going to be fun for anybody else to watch. But also, I know as a viewer what I like. And so I know that people say that reviews on BookTube don't get very many views. I
Mm.
love watching reviews. I really, really enjoy it, especially when I watch people like Mike or Alan. Like I know Mike, I like to pick out what people's strengths are and stuff on what they do. And I think that, like I said, with you two, I'm always just so impressed with how on top of the edge of what's trending. And you both are very articulate and explain very clearly about what you found was a strength for you in the book. and what you think your audience might appreciate. I think there's an art to that. I think there's an art to doing a good review. So I guess I just am a nerd and I enjoy the art to
Yeah.
reviews.
I think you definitely mastered reviewing books as well.
Oh, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah,
Thank
definitely.
you. Well, that means a lot to me because I enjoy them. I just think they're fun. I think it's a fun thing. And I have no idea why, but I just think there's something cool about that. And I do enjoy watching them, especially if you've read the book and then you go back
Mm,
and see what people have said. And then
Yeah.
even if it's people always say that reviews are evergreen content. And I think that that's true because even if you don't get a lot of views initially on a review, you
mm.
do a review. Let's say you did your Words of Radiance, you did a Words of Radiance review, and then months from now, people could say, "Hey, have you read Words of Radiance?" And you said, "Yeah, I have a review," and you could just point them there.
Yep.
Easy.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I do enjoy reviews as well, but it's just brutal because people will only click on it if they know the book.
Yeah.
So like doing a review for a self-published book, like that will kill you in the algorithm, which is just it's sad, but that's just the reality.
I
Yeah.
think review is very, very weird. It's just, I mean, most of the time it doesn't gather many viewers, but sometimes I don't even know what decides this. Sometimes an unpopular book can gain plenty of attention. A review for
Yeah.
an unpopular book, but sometimes again, it's like gambling. It's basically like gambling now. If we're talking about statistic, of course,
Yeah.
which is unfortunate because if possible, I really want reviews on BookTube to do well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've done some reviews for like Prior of the Orange Tree and Words of Radiance, and
Hmm.
even those videos they do the worst, even though they're like massively popular. I mean, they don't do bad, but it's just people love lists. Do a top 10 list, you'll gain views.
They
Yeah, yeah,
do. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And they always make me nervous to do those kind of lists. I will at some point. I don't know why I haven't done one yet, but
Oh,
but yeah,
you
those type
should.
of lists are really, really they're fun to watch for sure. And
Yeah.
Petrik, so I picked up obviously both actually Legends and Lattes and Sons of Darkness this last year based on your reviews. And with your Sons of
Mhm.
Darkness review, which was a self-published book, or maybe
Mm.
indie published would be the more
Yeah,
accurate term.
yeah.
And I know he's going through some changes with his publishing right now, or publishers right now, the author Gaurav Mohanty. But it was interesting because I heard your interview with that author, and he said that there were people even in India who picked up his book thanks to your review.
Wow.
Yeah, that was shocking to me as well.
And that's a self-published book, so it got a lot
Yeah,
of attention.
yeah. But that's why I said what I said earlier, because my review for Sons of Darkness, which was an unknown book, that was my highest performing stats for a review. And
Wow.
yeah, that did quite well. I mean, for me anyway, that did quite well.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still so impressed with just how well that helped out that author. So
Yeah.
obviously they do a lot for the authors too. Let me know in the chat what you all think about reviews. I would love to hear if you have any thoughts about that. Uh let's see. It depresses me. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
we'll have to see whether that trend, what really happens with that trend. I know a lot of people are doing short reviews on shorts now too. So
Yeah. And wrap ups, I mean, they've been around for a long time, but yeah, you can cover like 6 books or 8 books in a 10-minute video doing a wrap up.
yeah.
Yeah. Wait, Petrik is gone.
Oh yeah, he's gonna be back in a second. Let's
All right.
see. I love reviews. Yay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic. And so you actually, one thing I've also appreciated about what you've been doing on your channel is that you've been doing these polls, I guess, with your viewers or putting out polls on favorite authors or favorite books. What gave you that idea? And tell me about that. What have you found with that? Were there any surprises with that?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well,
Hi,
I suppose. Hi, Patrick. Well, I do watch quite a lot of videos on like how to do YouTube, how to come up with video ideas and stuff. And I just remember like Mr. Beast, the biggest creator on the platform. He said the difference between a video that might gain like 3 million views and 10 million views is usually just the 10 million views will have a better idea and not necessarily be more work put into it. So I just been thinking about like I don't need to like do crazy much work to gain views. I just need to come up with good ideas. I suppose maybe I was a bit inspired by. I mean, Petrik has done some videos where he's asked people on Twitter about their favorite this or this, and I just thought like if I make a Google form and ask something differently, then it might be really interesting. And I got almost 600 responses, so it's quite a lot of work to like go through all the data, but definitely
It
some
did, right?
interesting results.
It's a lot of data, but that's amazing that you were able to put together those results.
Yeah. But it's just fun to do something different. I suppose that's what I've been trying from the very start, to just try to do something that is different, but it's also just to help me learn some new skills and stuff.
That's really cool. I loved it. I love that whole idea. And you're always coming up with really innovative ideas. So that's really cool. I also loved your reading the Silmarillion in the theater video. That was so funny.
That was definitely like an idea where I was like, I need to explore if some things work, but that video tanked. Like it did not do well.
Oh no,
but,
I thought it was funny.
Fortunately, I knew the guy that owned the cinema, so I didn't pay anything to rent it. Otherwise, it would have been quite expensive.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was lots of fun.
Do you think there's anything on our corner of BookTube where people would be surprised to learn? Or I know, because I know, Petrik, you did a video where you gathered results of either underhyped, I think, fantasy, something along those lines.
So that's a great video.
Yeah, and you were saying that you were explaining, I think, that there's a difference between what's trending on BookTube or in our little corner of the internet here versus what's happening in the outer world of fantasy. Do you think there's anything that would surprise people who regularly watch BookTube?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I mean, like when I gathered that response, people, well, some of the results are quite insane, to be honest. But I didn't made it to the top list. But I'm not gonna lie, some people actually mention A Song of Ice and Fire as underhyped. Like, what more do you want? Like, it has a TV show adaptation. People around the world are watching it. People know the series, and you still think it's underhyped? Like, come on.
Maybe because it's not talked about at the level it was when the show was going on. Maybe that's what they meant.
I don't know, but I just think that sometimes the word underrated and underhyped can be confusing, because technically underrated means that the rating is below average, right? The rating is below, let's say, 3.5 or something. But underhyped is that it's less talked about, right? People doesn't talk about these series that much, but I think people just combine them together, and that, because of that, there's a lot of mixed series inside these two. What is Song of Ice and Fire? Okay, I guess he's right about that.
Brian Lee Durfee wouldn't know who that is.
That is the series I've heard is underhyped. Brian Lee Durfee's series.
Yeah, I really think it's underhyped. Come on, Brian Lee Durfee mentioned A Song of Ice and Fire in his acknowledgement in his book.
Right. That's so funny. Yeah, Alan, by the way, he did one of the first videos I saw of Alan's was so funny, because he did this whole like they all can't be Game of Thrones, or not every book could be Game of Thrones, and talking about how publishers at one point in time, they probably still do this, say if you like Game of Thrones, you'll like
this.
Just so funny. But that's interesting. That's interesting, though, that people said that. And what you said about underrated versus underhyped. So underhyped, I guess, is just not getting enough attention. That's what that would mean.
Yeah, because when I asked that question to my people on BookTube community tab, and then also on Twitter, the result is quite different. The one that's found to be underrated or underhyped are different from both social media. And I didn't even ask on Goodreads, because Goodreads algorithm is really hard to track.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting.
I think one thing that's really important when you do BookTube and stuff is to not feel too disappointed if a video tanks.
Yeah,
there's always a learning experience. Like if a video doesn't do well, like you can look at why didn't people enjoy it and learn from that. So even like your bad videos are still a lesson. So
Yeah. I think that could be very paralyzing too. If you're a content creator and you're expecting you're trying to do videos only that you think won't tank, like
Yeah.
Yeah.
um that's a tough way to be creative. I don't think you can be a real you cannot be free in your creativity if that's your mindset, I think. So
Mm,
Absolutely.
mm,
Yeah.
mm.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean that's the same thing I think with any endeavor too. If you're a writer and you're only writing what you think will be the best
Mm.
thing ever, that's probably going to be paralyzing for whatever endeavor you take on.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
And
yeah.
it matters a lot that you should just like books, you should read whatever you want, you should create whatever you want. And I know that can be hard. I mean, we are all in a way influenced by statistic, whether we are doing this for a living or not. I mean, if we keep on getting bad stats, we will, well, feel sad.
Yeah.
We will feel sad about it. That's
Mm.
unfortunate, but we have to try our best to not get disappointed by that. I mean, eventually we will learn which one, maybe at the end of the day, maybe the things that we like will click in with, will be working with viewers who subscribe to our channel.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that completely.
Yeah.
And I think that that also can speak to growth too, because I think that the more people, if like you two have fairly larger channel, well, you have much larger channels than I do, for example. And so I think that when you see that sort of statistic growth or dip or whatever, it's probably not as, it's going to probably look more dramatic based
Mm.
on the numbers that you already
Mm,
have to start with. When you have a smaller channel, I feel like those dips don't look as exaggerated. I don't know. That's my theory. I'm not totally sure if that's true or not. That could be
mm,
totally false, but I think that they're um it's interesting. It's just important, I think, to take that into perspective. That's one video out of so many videos that are so loved and so popular. And
Yeah.
everybody, I think, has to have that now and then. I
yeah.
think everyone has to have their videos that are not going to be home runs for everyone. And that doesn't mean, like you said, that they won't be valued over time or even valued by the people who did watch the
Mm.
videos.
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah.
and one thing that I've found with YouTube that is quite interesting is like it seems like a lot of the bigger creators that gain a lot of views maybe don't have as strong connection with their followers as a lot of the smaller booktubers. Like it seems
Mm.
like a lot of booktubers under 10,000 subscribers, like their following is diehard following, and they are all Patreons, and they all watch like, and maybe those booktubers don't grow that much, but it just seems like the following is much more dedicated to those creators. So yeah, it seems like you can't have both. Like either you want to become like very trendy and kind of lose that touch, or you just need to be more like down to earth and maybe not grow as fast, but you will gain something else in return. So but maybe
Yeah.
you can get both.
I do think Alan and Jimmy has many followings. Yeah, both of them has. I mean, both of them has really loyal friends and loyal fans. I don't know whether that's the right term for that, but
Yeah.
loyal friends. Okay. Yeah.
They're both doing pretty well, though. I mean, Jimmy just hit over 10K, and
Yeah.
Alan is pretty close to
Yep.
10K.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But I mean, they could both easily be much bigger.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
I love them both. So I might be a little biased, but you know. Oh, well, Evie said that Jimmy is 10K. Jimmy, he's new man. All right. Well, so long, Jimmy.
He's
But
a new man. He's a new man.
yeah. The sad thing when all your friends become so big and they don't have time for you anymore. But
Oh
I'm
no.
kidding. I'm totally kidding. Obviously, people here are wonderful, and I think that's the most important thing to me personally is just having that community aspect to have that friendship, and it's just I don't know. I mean, I don't. I think that that's what makes BookTube so special, and I hope that never goes away. Yeah,
Yep.
so fantastic. So
Absolutely.
we're just about at an hour and a half, and I know
Wow.
that
It's gone
we
quick.
needed to wrap up around this time. Were there any final things you two wanted to share?
Well, I really enjoyed our chat. I think if there's one thing that I've probably missed in my first year on BookTube is having more interactions with other BookTubers. So I really appreciate you having me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's been so wonderful to have you on. And this is your first live show, right? With live discussion.
Yes, yeah, first live show, yeah.
So what an honor for me. So fantastic.
I also want to say thank you so much because I know it's not easy to make the time with my time zone. Yeah, it's not easy. I know, and that's why I don't appear a lot on plenty of group chats. I know that my time zone can be tricky to do, but yeah, I truly appreciate this, and I love talking with booktubers. I just like books. I love getting new perspective. I love learning about stuff. I think talking with people always means that we learn something new.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Mad respect for Petrik. It's like 1 a.m. where you are, right?
Yeah, almost 1 a.m. here.
Like, it's real. Oh no, I don't think I'm gonna have a live stream.
They are fun. They're fun to have, and I've enjoyed
are,
the chat immensely. So thank you everyone who has shown up here. Thank you again to Library of a Viking and Petrik Leo. This has been so much fun, and I've really enjoyed getting to know more about you two. And of course, I'm a huge admirer of everything you do for the community and everything that you've been following with fantasy trends, and excited to see what's coming up with you two in this next year, or this year, I should say, as we're in 2023 now. So thank you all so much. And
Thank you, Joanna.
yeah, thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, we're going to go ahead and end it here. So thanks, everybody, and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.